Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Shaping the Future of OpenEdge 2024 Product Survey Results. My name is Jessica Malakian, and I'll be today's moderator. Let's start by quickly introducing to you our speaker for today. Today, we are joined by our speaker, Marie Candela. Marie is currently a member of the OpenEdge Product Management team, providing a focus on data management. Marie joined Progress in 2006 to be the development manager for the OpenEdge database, a role she enjoyed for several years. Moving from development to release management to product management, Marie now gathers customer requirements, defines features and capabilities, and drives their rollout and delivery in releases. I'll now turn it over to Marie to start the presentation.
Thank you, Jess. Good day, everyone. As Jess mentioned, we're here to look at the survey results. This survey for OpenEdge has been annual for the past 5 years, and our objective with it is to get current, refresh our understanding of both our partners and our customers so that we can obtain their current and future business needs and priorities. This survey is a key part of the pipeline to feature definition, release definitions, and our ability to provide solutions that will help you successfully achieve your goals. The survey itself is about 60 questions. It adapts depending on your responses. There are several question areas that start with, do you use something? And if the answer is no or I don't know, then we move on to the next topic. If yes, then we ask more in-depth questions about that area. I will say, because of the number of questions on the survey, that we're not reporting on every single one here in the webinar. That would just be too many, but we are getting all of the highlights. The survey was open for a period of about 50 days at the end of 2024, mid-September to the end of October. We had 410 respondents that have contributed to the information that we're using here. Some of the topic areas that it covered were demographics of yourself, of the respondent, your company, how you're using OpenEdge, etc. What is your approach to releases? We then looked at some of the technologies that we want to know more about from your perspective, specific features, and then there was a section about customer satisfaction, your satisfaction with how we support OpenEdge, the collateral, the website, etc. So first we're going to start with the customers. We asked several questions about the respondent, their organization, platforms, products, team sizes. So the first question we asked was, what is your role in the company? This was a similar profile as we saw in 2023, in that about 50% are developers. We had another category that also mentioned many people claimed that they held multiple roles. Aside from the 50% that are developers, all of the others are 10% or lower. So you can see that the survey may be heavy in developer information, but we also take that into account when we look at some of the responses, because your role as a respondent is pertinent to your ability to answer some of the questions. Different roles will have different knowledge about your systems, usage, and your requirements. We then asked about your industries that you are developing apps for. This was a multi-select. We did call out our 4 highest industries that we typically see: manufacturing, retail, finance and banking, and healthcare. And then there was a large other category. So you can see the top 4 ranged from about 17% to 37%. The other category was a 30% total, and that covered a broad array of industries. And I've listed many of those at the bottom of this slide. What this says to us as OpenEdge providers is that OpenEdge is being used in a wide range of industries in multiple diverse business sectors. Some of the respondents mentioned that they had applications for a specific industry, but other applications were industry agnostic, one even giving the comment, if it runs OpenEdge, we support it. We then moved to how does your company use OpenEdge? This was also a multi-select. This was also similar to what we saw last year. The top section, the top two, are we develop and maintain our own in-house applications, so they're using it in-house. Or the second one is that we use it in-house, but our application is provided from a vendor. Those two together had about 60% respondents. The middle section is that we sell standalone on-premise products to our customers, or we host applications as services for our customers. Those two together came out at about 65%. The bottom section, we provide services. One is we provide professional/consulting services. The other is education services. We were surprised that that was as high as 35%. That's also good to see. We asked, which versions of OpenEdge do you currently use in production? This was a multi-select question. Many of our customers have multiple versions in use at any point in time. Some of them are large enterprises with multiple apps and multiple databases, and others are application partners that support multiple versions for their customers. The green bars are the long-term support releases, 12.2 and 12.8. The yellow bar is 11.7, which is currently active, but it is retiring shortly on April 1st. All of the blue ones are retired. The oldest version that we offered on the select list was 10.2b. Therefore, the other category shows some version 8 and some version 9 users. What's nice to see is that 92% of the respondents are on version 12. It's also good to see that innovation releases are being used. Note that this was at a specific point in time so that anyone answered to yes, we're currently using an innovation version in production. They may already be off of it, but it also doesn't take into account those that had earlier been on an innovation release and perhaps went up to 12.8. I also want to remind you that the innovation versions for 12.x are retired. Note also that this data is from a specific point in time, mid-September to the end of October last year. If we were to take a fresh sample today, I would expect to see movement from 11.7 from the yellow bar to the 12.2 or 12.8 long-term support versions, the green bars. Next, we asked about your engineering team size. And we asked, how large is your engineering team managing OpenEdge applications? We see that the OpenEdge team size is relatively small, with 62% reporting 1 to 10 people. Those are the top 3 bars on the graph. This also is a similar profile as we saw last year. Now we're going to move to releases and updates. These are the delivery life cycle's 2 components that we use to get the software to you. First, we ask about the release strategy in that we'd like you to understand your approach to OpenEdge releases. This was a select the best option. It seems that people are more assessing and going to innovation releases than in the past. We saw a 10% increase in that over last year. The top 2 bars on this graph talk about going to releases, whereas the top one is that we always upgrade to the latest innovation or long-term support release. That was about 25%. And then the next one down is that we're open to using an innovation release in production if it delivers new capabilities that are important to us. The long bar in the middle is that we may look at an innovation release, but we're only going to upgrade production to an LTS. And that is the most common here. It's about 37%. Then we had a small set that are using a vendor supplied OpenEdge application, and therefore they're constrained to the release that that vendor supports. So the movement between innovations and long-term support does seem to depend on the features that are introduced into a release. And yet there is a subset that will never use an innovation release. They're going to do long-term support only. And then the other end is those that go to each one. We asked about your deployment timeline. What is the overall time required for developing and testing your applications for a new OpenEdge release in preparation for putting it into production? This is the information we received last fall. What we see is a good number, actually over 15%, takes less than a month, but the bulk of people are in the 1 to 3 month category at about 33%. We did a trend on this over the last 5 years of surveys. And when you look at it, the bar on the left, the turquoise bar is 2020, so it's the oldest information, whereas the green bars are always 2024, the latest information. And what we see is a big movement from greater than 1 to 3 months into the 1 to 3 month bucket. And then likewise, especially good to see is on the far right is that grouping of greater than 12 months, whereas 5 years ago, it was 30% of the respondents said it would take them more than a year, and we're now down to about 7% there. So that's great. We then we moved from releases to updates. Updates are a way that we deliver critical bug fixes and remediations to security issues in the long-term support releases. Occasionally, we have issued an update on an innovation release, but that is a bit rare. So our question was, when do you apply updates? The top section, the top two bars, is that we're installing those updates. The topmost one is as soon as it's posted by Progress without formal testing. The next one down is that we install that update as soon as possible after we've done testing. So between those two, we're at about just over 40% of updates are being installed. The next section is that we do not test and deploy every update. And there's two reasons here. The top bar in the middle there is that testing requirements require a lot of time and effort. And the next one down is that the deployment time and costs are high. So what we would like to remind you of is that if you're not able to apply those updates in a timely manner, you are potentially leaving yourself exposed to perhaps a critical bug that could take your deployment offline for a bit to remediate. Or if it's security vulnerabilities, you could have some exposures there. If your deployment costs are high or your testing costs are significant, then you might want to take a look at best practices to streamline those processes. Next, we asked an exploratory question. We have been issuing more frequent updates lately to be responsive, yet we are hearing a clear message back from customers that more frequent updates are problematic for them to consume. So we asked if we deployed frequent security and critical bug updates that were strictly focused on those two areas, would you be able to deploy them immediately into production? The largest response here we got was no at 45%. Yes, we were surprised. We got almost a 30% that said that they could. Fair number of I don't know here. Think back to the number of developers that responded. This is more of a IT operational kind of question. They may not have been aware. However, we will take this information into account on our planning. Those that said yes, we asked a further question of please share what enables you to deploy these updates immediately. And there were 74 responses on this. And what we did, this was an open text response. So we have analyzed this data and categorized it. I'm not going to read all the words on this slide, but these are some areas that customers cited. There's automated deployment pipelines, there's continuous integration, continuous delivery. They have some self-managed deployment software. Some are on the cloud, some are using containers. And some, the number two item on that list there is that they have prioritized security vulnerabilities. So they will move in a much quicker manner if that's what an update is bringing to them. We also asked, this is another exploratory question, keeping in mind that the current lifecycle model is that new features are currently only delivered with innovation and long-term support releases. We have been brainstorming other ways that we can get features out to you earlier. And one of the ideas that we had was to slowly release new features in already released long-term support releases. So in the current scenario today, 12.8 is our latest long-term support release. It's also the end of our 12 series. Our next innovation release will probably be labeled 13.0 for a 13 series. Now we're going to introduce new features in 13.0. However, it may be a couple of years before we put out another long-term support release. And so what this does is it gives you a lag of being able to deploy those new features. So the question we asked is, do you want it to stay as it is today? Or would you be interested in us introducing the new features, delivering them to you as by way of updates in the existing latest long-term support release? And what we got back on that was a yes from about 50%. That's the top bar. And we've got over 40% saying to leave it as is. So, we also found in the other category, it turned out that many of those answers under other was, I don't care. Whichever way you do it, we can absorb it. So from the progress side, we're continually monitoring feedback on our lifecycle policies. We do not at this time anticipate any immediate changes. We are glad to get the input. We do want to continue working with you to better understand how we can meet your needs with new capabilities. Now we're going to move on to development. This includes tools, technologies, and AI usage. First, we asked, what development tools are you using? This was a multi-select. Our top three are Procedure Editor, PDS for OE, and the App Builder. This is a very similar profile as we've been seeing over the past couple of years. We do, however, as the years have gone by, see an increase year over year for VS Code. Then we asked about OOABL. And we specifically asked, we gave you an open text question asking what additional enhancements would you like for OOABL that would be most beneficial for your development projects. We had 109 responses in this. What it is a broad array of additional enhancements were asked for. And again, we've synthesized this and categorized it. This list is ordered in order of what we heard most of. So we've got generics, multi-threading, Lambda expressions, reflection, dynamic class loading, etc. What's interesting about this list is that many of these items in these categories have already had an initial implementation and delivery in the 12.x releases. So I haven't done a slice and dice to see how many of the respondents that asked for things here are still on 11.7, but there's an expectation that that's probably the case. And if you're even on 12, but maybe some of the earlier versions, especially if you're at 12.2, there were many things introduced between 12.3 and 12.8 that were new introductions. So I encourage you, if you are looking for something on this list, to take a look at the 12.x what's new documents and see if perhaps some of your enhancement requests have already been addressed in software that we are delivering now. Next, we asked about AI coding assistants. The first question was, have you used one? There was about a third that said yes, 35%. And last year's response, yes, on that was at 18%. So we have seen almost double the growth on that. Those that are using it that said yes, we asked which one. Not surprising, the top two are ChatGPT at over 70% and GitHub Copilot at over 40%. Now, this was a multi-select. I would imagine anyone that's out exploring this area probably would examine more than one just to see the differences in them. But what this is telling us is that people are still experimenting and trying it out. It's not yet pervasive in the open edge development community. Again, of those that answered yes, that they're using them, we asked them to please share your experience and thoughts on the effectiveness of the AI-based coding assistance. It became very clear. In fact, often in the same single response, there would be, well, we are seeing that it can boost productivity, but sometimes it gives the wrong answer. So many of the responses gave both pros and cons. We separated it out that way and pulled together the information. This is a summary at a high level of what we saw. The positives show how AI-based assistants can improve your coding efficiency, especially for basic tasks. They also have been cited as giving a good initial overview of complex code and that they can speed up development processes. The negatives have shown the limitations, especially when working with specialized languages such as OpenEdge ABL, the inaccuracy of generated code, and the reliance on human oversight for effective results. Anyways, I don't think any of these findings are a surprise to anyone in the audience that's been either learning about or experimenting with AI for generating code. It just shows that in general, as an industry, it's not far enough along for us yet to just generate code and put it into a product with no extra effort. We then also asked for those that had answered yes, if AI capabilities were integrated into OpenEdge products, which aspects of your development or CI/CD pipeline would you most like to enhance? We offered these selections, so this was a select all that apply. This set of responses, of course, is high on the development side versus CI/CD. And it may just be that we're a little more mature with AI assisting in our development process with coding than other parts of the cycle. But what this does do is it gives us in OpenEdge a prioritization for our focus on this area. We moved off of AI to ask about your UI approach. What UI do you expect to use for your OpenEdge apps? What this is showing us is that people are modernizing to browser-based, most to a web-based UI at over 60%. There's a close second in the Windows desktop UI at 50%. Now we're going to move on to deployment and operations. This is basically, what is your environment? What context are you either developing in or delivering into? We asked about your progress OpenEdge deployment preferences for 2025. This was a multi-select. Both our partners and our customers may be in multiple categories here. On-premise servers remains dominant at over 65% here, but cloud platforms are increasing in choice over what we've been seeing year over year. Cloud is also mentioned in multiple variations. There's an all-in, everything on the cloud. There's a lot of hybrids. There is some private. For those that said yes to cloud, we further asked about your vendor preferences for OpenEdge deployments. It's not surprising that the top two were the major vendors, Microsoft Azure and Amazon AWS. The 20% in the other category is a little large, but looking into the comments there, we find the different approaches. Some are doing a private cloud, some are self-hosting, and some are using regional providers instead of the major vendors. We asked about the OpenEdge database. What is the size of your largest OpenEdge database? We continue to see about 30% in the 10 to 250 gig bucket. From 2 years ago, we did not ask this question last year, but we did 2020 through 2022. 2 years ago, since then, there has been a shift into the larger buckets. We then asked another open text question about what features are you missing that would help you manage your databases better. We received about 110 responses on this, and what these items do is they reflect a consistent trend towards improving operational efficiency, reducing downtime, and modernizing the tools for better management and performance of databases. The topmost item, again, we took all of the responses we got, we've synthesized them together and come up with these categories. The topmost one that is usually our top one over the years is online schema changes. But we also have other things looking for improved database performance and monitoring tools, replication enhancements, backup and restore enhancements, etc. The thing that I want to mention is just like OOABL, many of these areas have had enhancements released in 12.x. So if, again, I encourage you, if you're not on a version 12 release, definitely if you're not on version 12.8, you should go take a look at the what's new documents for 12.2 through 12.8 and see if there are features there that you're still asking for that have already been delivered and available for your use. Next, we move to containers. We asked, are you, yes or no, is your organization currently using containers? Well, we got 25% saying yes. So this shows that we have a segment of our customers that are finding value in containers. And to those that said yes, we followed up with what benefits are you experiencing? So those of you that are not using containers, you may want to look at these benefits and see if they could possibly be useful for you. They covered quite a few. The benefits were a multi-select, and so as you see, the lowest one that was selected was 35%, up to 65%. So customers are citing improved scalability and flexibility, easier deployment and faster deployment cycles, better resource utilization, cost efficiency, and simplified application management and orchestration. Next, we moved on to SQL. This was another open text question of please describe the features you need in your database management. There were about 50 respondents on this. We have a smaller set of the customer base using SQL. These items that were cited are for managing databases for reporting, analytics, data warehousing, and all of these align with the core goals of business intelligence and performance optimization. So just a few of the highlights here in these categories: SQL Data Lake and warehousing, queries for reporting, optimization and execution plans for SQL, warehousing, data warehousing features, etc. All right, next we're going to look at security. We start with looking at the trends for security strategy. We ask the question of which of the options relate to your security aspects of your business, and this was a multi-select. Because we don't anticipate that someone is just using one approach to security in their business, we're not surprised at the number of things selected. We do have a couple of trends going on. These trend lines are going down. However, these security actions are of the type that we would hope to see reducing over time. The first one is relying on OpenEdge. The second is we rarely analyze for security. And the third is that we have never done security analysis. Now, as far as relying on OpenEdge, we're glad that you have trust in our OpenEdge built-in capabilities. And while we appreciate that, we have to note that OpenEdge is not your full environment. It should not be your total support for security. Additionally, in OpenEdge, we provide functionality, but it often needs to be configured for your environment. So keep in mind that if you aren't thoroughly using it with the configurations and enabling things, then you may need to look more deeply into that. The other trend that we're seeing was these are all going up in the responses, but these are all ways that we would expect to see in managing security throughout your environment. And the first one is a dedicated security team. The second is that you're doing regular scans. And the third is that you're making use of external consultants. We did ask about a specific feature that we've been hearing from customers about, a secrets management system or SMS. So we are looking for how pervasive is this need at this time? And we asked the question of, does your organization require a secrets management system for managing items such as passwords, API keys, and certificates? And we got about 26% saying yes. So we do have a segment of our customers that are moving to a centralized secrets management system. We asked, what are your reasons? This was a multi-select, all that apply. These reasons go from about 40% to almost 80% of the respondents. Again, that was of those that said yes on the secrets management system. So the top one here is to securely manage and store secrets. Next is improve security practices and reduce risk. Third is the centralized aspect across applications and environments. That is one of those that we're hearing a lot about in that many organizations, they have multiple apps and they're having to do configuration and authorization settings in multiple applications or multiple databases. And what they want with their SMS is to provide a centralized solution that they're only having to do those configurations once, but all of their apps and databases do interoperate with the SMS to get that information. We also asked another question that I don't have a results slide for about what solutions are you exploring, a number of named vendors. And there was also a category of we're not far enough along to have settled on one yet. But what we saw was a fairly evenly distribution through the various vendors. And so what this tells us is that there was a broad selection of solutions that are being explored. Okay, that's what I have for the data presentation. So now we'll wrap up. We always ask in OpenEdge after we do this survey, we go, what have we learned? And what we see here from the information that I've presented today is that there's a broad array of customers in how they're using OpenEdge, how they distribute OpenEdge, the technologies that they're using, the niche solutions that they need to take advantage of. And so everything in here influences what we make for features and functionalities, when we make it, the prioritization and the timing. It also affects how we architect and implement the solution in that for most part, we cannot just architect it for a specific use case. We have to have it more broadly available for use. This information that you've given us also affects how we deliver the solutions, how you use it, and how we support it. So the responses overall reinforce with us that all of our solutions must be general, adaptable, scalable, and end user configurable. Where do we go from here? All of this data will be used by us to consider features. We directly take it in product management. We look for a lot of the nuggets that come out in the open text comments. We look for anything new appearing. We look for changes in emphasis. We potentially will add new features to our backlog from this. We will be prioritizing across already existing features in our backlogs and any new ones that we add. And then these ultimately may feed into future roadmaps, again, depending on the prioritizing. We will also be following up from this session with a written report that will contain much of the material that you saw here in the webinar. That will be available on our website in a few weeks. And so I thank you for your time today to hear our feedback, but I more especially thank you for having participated in the survey and for giving your responses. And if perhaps you did not have an opportunity to participate this year, I hope you will have that opportunity next year and that you will see how much this information feeds into us and know that it's worthwhile for your time to do this for us. Thank you. Jess, do we have any questions?
Great. Thank you so much, Marie. Yeah, so we'll turn over to our live Q&A session. So the first question is, what are some other ways that customers can give input aside from this survey?
Oh, that's a great question because I just realized I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that the survey is the only way to give input. We have several things on our website. There are the Open Edge communities, which we have a general community, but we also have several more targeted ones that either there's PAS-OE, there's architecture in general with Open Edge, deployment, Pro2, the database. All of those are public communities. Anyone can participate. We also have another special type of community called Ideas, which is sort of a suggestion box. Again, anyone, that's generally available to the public. Anyone can participate in that. I will say product management and developers, support engineers, a lot of people within Progress follow these communities. So there can be some good interactive discussions going on. We do have a private community that's called, it's the CVP, Customer Validation Program. And that's more tied to development of new features, and it's actively participated in by development as we start to create and define and implement features for the new versions, both the innovation and the long-term support releases. This is a private community. This is restricted to customers that are actively using OpenEdge. And what we look for is especially customers that are following along with us, want to try out some of the latest stuff, maybe have some features that they're really looking for that when we start development of them, they can give us early feedback on those features before they're finally released. And then the last item I thought of was that the PUG challenges, which are not owned by Progress, but of course we're a major participant. We always have product management and development representation at those challenges, both Europe and the Americas, that you can, talk to us there. That's a couple times a year.
Yeah. And kind of talking about the Ideas portal, someone asked, with this portal, will you cross-match the requests there with this survey?
Uh, that's an interesting idea. We hadn't considered that yet, but we will look for opportunities to do so.
Great. And the next question is, do you publish the survey results? So I can actually step in and answer this one. It was on one of your slides, Marie, towards the end. But yes, the survey results will be published in a report style PDF, and we will make sure to share it with you all once it is available, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So that is actually it for questions today. So thank you, Marie, for the great presentation. If you didn't get a chance to ask a question, please respond to the email that will have ways to contact us, or please reach out via the Ideas portal or the CVP, and we'll be able to answer things a lot more quickly over there. And thank you to everyone who attended today's webinar, and have a great rest of your day.